I was recently asked to participate in an event called Beyond Green. And it's interesting because in the last few years we've been talking about sustainable architecture. I've done a number of videos on this topic, but it is always kind of a touchy subject for me. Because I do like to feel that my designs or the designs I'm presenting are somehow better than other people's designs. Just because they happen to be more sustainable. It's not about feeling superior or being elitist about your choices. It's really about being mindful and making the best possible decisions with the information that you have at the time and using the best available materials at the time you redesign in. But the push towards sustainability has come a long way. And now we're talking about going beyond green. So let's talk about what that means. Let's unpack this idea. I want to start by saying that there is no one path to sustainability. If you were to look at the various ways that different cultures approach the idea of living sustainably, you would see that there is no one right answer. There are many different paths to arrive at the same destination. So when you start thinking about the issue of sustainability, you can't have a one-size-fits-all mentality. You have to recognize that every project is going to be different. Every building is going to have its own unique set of circumstances, and therefore is going to require its own unique solution. That said, there are some basic principles that are going to apply to almost every project. So let's start with those. First off, let's talk about orientation. Orientation is such a critical factor in the amount of energy that you use in a building. And it is amazing to me how often that gets overlooked or dismissed in favor of form or aesthetics. The shape of the building and its orientation determines how much energy you're going to use for heating and cooling, for lighting, and even for ventilation. It determines how much daylight you get into the space and how well you can take advantage of passive solar heating. In our studio, we always start by analyzing the sun's path over the course of the year. We do these diagrams called solar plots. They show us exactly where the sun is going to be at different times of the day in the year. This helps us determine where windows should go and what the size of those windows should be. And it also helps us determine where we can place walls to take advantage of exterior conditions that will help us maintain a comfortable temperature inside the building without having to rely on mechanical heating and cooling. In hot climates, we try to maximize the amount of shade we can get from trees and from the buildings themselves. In cold climates, we try to maximize the amount of sun we can get into the building, especially low-angle winter sun. It's incredible how much energy you can save by simply taking advantage of the free energy provided by the sun. And this is just one example of how sustainability can drive the design of a building in a very positive way. I remember working on a project in Vermont, a single-family home. And we had a situation where the client really wanted a south-facing window in the living room. And I was trying to explain to them that if we put that window in, we would have to install a 24-foot-long overhang to protect it from the summer sun. And they weren't too keen on that idea because they thought it would look strange. But we were able to work it out in a way that ended up being very beneficial for them. We designed the building so that the window actually became part of the roof form. So instead of being a rectangular window with a strange overhang next to it, the window became part of the overall aesthetic of the house, and it worked out really well. Not only did we get the passive solar benefits that we needed, but it ended up looking really cool, and the client was thrilled with the end result. Now, let's move on to another key aspect of sustainable architecture, which is insulation. Insulation is critical for maintaining a comfortable temperature inside a building while minimizing the amount of energy that you use for heating and cooling. It's amazing to me how little attention is paid to insulation in most conventional construction. When you consider that heating and cooling accounts for nearly half of the energy used in a typical home, it makes sense to invest a little bit more upfront in order to save a lot more over the lifetime of the building. Now, when we're designing buildings, we focus on getting the envelope as tight as possible. We use high-performance windows and doors, and we insulate walls and roofs to the highest level that code allows. And sometimes, we even exceed the code requirements. It is amazing how much of a difference this can make in the amount of energy that a building uses. So, let's talk about materials. This is probably where I've seen the biggest shift in the last few years. There are a lot more options now than there were before. It wasn't that long ago that if you wanted to build a green building, your options for flooring were pretty limited. You could do bamboo or you could do cork. Today, there are so many different options for flooring that are more sustainable than traditional materials like hardwood or carpet. There are companies that make flooring out of recycled plastic bottles, others that make it out of rapidly renewable resources like bamboo or hemp, and still others that make it out of natural materials like cork or linoleum. The same is true for cabinets and countertops. There are so many different options now that are more sustainable than traditional materials like MDF or granite. There are companies that make cabinets out of recycled plastic, others that make them out of bamboo or hemp, and still others that make them out of natural materials like wood. And the same is true for paint and finishes. There are so many different options now that are more sustainable than traditional materials like Voc paints. There are companies that make paints out of natural materials like milk paint or clay paint. In our studio, we specify the most sustainable materials that we can find within our budget constraints. And it's not always easy. Sometimes we have to balance the cost of a more sustainable material against the cost of a less sustainable material. But we always try to choose the most sustainable option whenever possible. And finally, let's talk about building systems. Building systems like HVAC and plumbing and electrical are a big part of the sustainability equation. These systems account for a significant portion of the energy used in a building, so it makes sense to invest in more sustainable options whenever possible. Now, this can mean anything from choosing more energy-efficient equipment to choosing renewable energy sources like solar or geothermal. In our studio, we always try to specify the most energy-efficient equipment that we can find, and we try to choose renewable energy sources whenever possible. We also try to design buildings that can take advantage of natural ventilation and daylighting in order to reduce the amount of energy that we use for heating, cooling, lighting, and even power. To sum it all up, when we're designing a building, we try to focus on 3 key areas: green design, energy efficiency, and eco-friendly materials. By focusing on these 3 areas, we can help create buildings that are more sustainable and have a smaller impact on the environment. Now, let's take a look at some projects that are doing just that. The first project we're going to look at is the Bullitt Center in Seattle, Washington. The Bullitt Center is a 6-story office building that is currently the world's greenest commercial building. It was designed by Miller Ho, and it is located in downtown Seattle. What makes the Bullitt Center so sustainable is its focus on energy efficiency and renewable energy. The building is heated and cooled by a geothermal system, and it generates its own electricity from photovoltaic panels on its roof. The building also features a rainwater harvesting system and a gray water system that uses treated wastewater from the building's toilets to water the plants in its courtyard. Another great example is the Park Hill neighborhood in Denver, Colorado. The Park Hill neighborhood is a community of 400 homes that is currently the largest sustainable community in the United States. The homes in the Park Hill neighborhood were built using green building principles, and they feature things like solar panels, geothermal heating and cooling, and rainwater harvesting systems. The community also features a network of walking paths and bike trails that connect residents to parks, shops, and transit. Finally, let's look at Masdar City in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. Masdar City is a planned city that is currently being constructed in Abu Dhabi, UAE. The city is being built as a model for sustainable urban development, and it will feature things like solar-powered buildings, electric vehicle infrastructure, and a waste-to-energy plant. The city is also being designed to promote walking and biking as a means of transportation, and it will feature a network of pedestrian-friendly streets and bike paths. Now, you're welcome to disagree with some of the ideas I've presented here. I know that there are some people who believe that sustainability is overrated, or that it is not worth the extra effort. But I hope that you can appreciate the importance of reducing our impact on the planet. As architects, we have the opportunity to design buildings that are not only beautiful and functional, but also environmentally friendly. And I think it's important that we take that opportunity seriously. Thank you for listening.